All right, everyone. Welcome to the Burnout, or I think. Actually, I have no idea what I'm doing.
No,
I'm Matt Weaver, joined by Kevin Swindell, Carson Hocevar, and this is going to be a podcast. I hope. I think.
maybe.
Um, Before I kind of do the roundtable and introduce you to the guys that you already know who they are, I'm going to give you some backstory first about how this whole thing came together, and I think that's super important. Is Me and Kevin, we had actually talked a couple of, gosh, about a year ago actually, about doing a podcast and kind of kick the story around back and forth. But I actually want to take us to the moment that really this whole thing kicked in gear. And Carson, you were here for this, and you have no idea that you kind of generated this kind of thought process that I wanted you to be a part of this, and I wanted this whole thing to come together. And it was actually Chili Bowl this
Hmm.
year, the same Chili Bowl that Speed Lab won. You can see in the background there. The massive flex. Carson, you were there chatting with Chase Briscoe. Um, who else was there? We had
Santino.
Santino Ferrucci was there, and you guys were just talking shop, and it was like such a diverse kind of racing background. And I had a moment for like 15 minutes where you guys were talking about horsepower and speed and just different disciplines all together. And I thought, man, this would make a really good conversation, like on the record publicly. It'd make a really cool podcast because it's just that huge diversity. And so, I went to Kevin and I kind of pitched that idea too. I'm like, hey, Carson wants to do a thing, and between like all of us and the multiple disciplines that we live in and experience. And Carson, you're going on a world tour right now too of multiple disciplines. This would be great content. So that's what the burnout is. That's what we're doing. First, I want to kick it to Kevin. Kevin, you had actually reached out to me. Not last December, but the December before that is really
Was
how
it
this
that
whole
long?
thing came together. It was that long ago. We've been kicking this around for 15 months. Why are we doing a podcast? How did we get here?
I think in that moment, I was to a point where I just felt like, a lot of this stuff that happens doesn't ever get a fair shake of really what goes down. I think it's such a, what gets posted to social media and the little bit of clips you see of stuff, and you never really know, like, how everything kind of transpires. And I feel like you see who's mad at who, but one guy never gets a fair shake. Nobody ever explains how they got to that point, and the depth of some of this stuff. And I feel like a lot of stuff. And I know growing up, I felt like, when there was less social media and things like that, it was always really hard when somebody said this is what happened. Like, you never could dig yourself out of a hole. And now there's so many angles of this stuff to see and really dissect stuff that, I think there's a way to really get to the correct route. And I think the casual fan deserves to understand who to actually be mad at some of the time.
For you, is it just a matter of then, I guess, telling a deeper story? Because when you first came to me with the idea, you had kind of pitched something that was kind of a little bit of Joe Rogan, a little bit of Dan Patrick, the man cave. Are we trying to aim for like the man cave of motorsports conversation and content?
I think it'd be fun. I mean, like what you talked about just a second ago of just kind of, a bunch of guys chatting about stuff. I think a lot of that stuff is really neat, and, a lot of perspectives on things. So, yeah, I mean, I think we all know a lot of people, and there's a lot of cool guys that we can get in here to talk to and get some perspectives on things. And obviously we're at a point where so much more goes down, and we know about everything that goes down now. You don't miss anything. So, yeah, it'd be a lot of fun to I think to really get together and go through a lot of this stuff.
And then kind of at the same time that the Kevin started to reach out to me a little bit after that, Carson, we had kind of kicked the idea around of a podcast too, that you really want to, share your experiences and share your takes. And, like Kevin said, it's a great opportunity and era to really talk about all these things. There's so much going on, not only in NASCAR, not only in short track, dirt track, everything. Racing right now is such a robust, growing industry. And I guess you just wanted to talk about all of it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that like is either so watered down on the because there's so much to the story that's not broadcasted to the average fan. It's not talked about or it's not given a racer's real perspective. It's all either corporate or corporate sponsors or PR. Like or it's there's seven media outlets all putting the same thing with a little sprinkle to it. Like instead of hearing directly from the guy, you don't hear about that anymore, in that sense. And there's just so much more that I wanted to add, or I see that I wanted to be able to talk about myself, but I just had no one else or no real platform that I can't just go on Twitter and just say my own opinion, right? Like I wanted to have a conversation and have a platform to have this conversation. So that's what I talked with you about, is just I want to know. There's questions I wish I was a journalist at times, where I wanted to ask questions to either journalist people or the race car drivers, or just to see where my thoughts kind of transpire, or what's in everybody else's mind. I love racing. I love talking about racing, and I just love the story of it. And there's so much in my world that I don't think is known or talked about, or people don't know, even that I have to hold to myself, or I've held, just because I've never had the right platform to talk about it. So I just know there's a million other stories out there that I probably don't know. And um, I think it'd be cool to find out, or cool to talk about, or just have that platform.
One of the things I think that I've always wanted to do a podcast. I think it's such a conversational medium, and it's a great way to connect to people in a really unique, impactful way. Especially now, it's not just an audio show, right? I mean, we're on video, and we're going to be able to really intimately reach people with this kind of racing conversation. But I think there's two reasons why I haven't done one before. One, there are so many different podcasts out there. There's so many different conversations out there, and I didn't want to do just another podcast. And that's to say nothing disrespectful to anyone else's content out there. I don't want it to listen. You can either be better than, worse than, or different than what someone else is doing, right? And there's a lot of people I can't be better than, but how can I do something different? And I think the really cool thing about having both of you be a part of this is that there are so many different perspectives that we're going to be able to bring to light here. We have two racers. We have a racer and an owner. We have a journalist, and we have pavement, dirt, national touring, short track, grassroots. All of that's kind of represented here in this room. And eventually we're going to bring in guests too, and we're going to be able to, peel the layers behind their stories. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to. But I think for me, and I'm speaking for myself, but I think it works for both of you too. The most important thing to me is authenticity. I think, to your point, Carson, there's a lot of content out there that I don't want to say that it's PR, but it's obviously it's very crafted to a certain degree. And I think that one thing we've learned today in this kind of drive to survive, dirty mo, era that we're in, is people really want that kind of raw, behind the scenes, inside story, insider's perspective. And I kind of want this to be the insiders podcast. And we have, three real, bona fide insiders here. You guys way more than me, certainly, but I can be kind of the director. And kind of going full circle, I want to go back to that conversation we all had at Chili Bowl. For the most part, I'm going to defer to you guys. I mean, I want to listen to you guys talk shop and share your perspectives. But that's kind of the mission here of what I hope that we can accomplish. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think for me, I just was to a point where I just wanted to ask the questions. So that was kind of my feeling of wanting to be able to do this, was really just I felt like nobody ever asked the right ones, especially to guys on our end of the side. Like a lot of the people who are trying to tell these things are always guys who've never done it, and they just really don't know how to carry a conversation. I felt like I did a few podcasts and things where they talked to me, and I didn't feel like they ever asked me anything that I've wanted to talk about a lot of the time too. And I think that's some of why I wanted to be in more control of a situation. And if I was going to do it, I needed especially somebody like Matt, who sees, I feel like, everything that happens somehow, which I felt like I did, but you were beyond me with adding like the pavement late models and all that stuff that I probably wouldn't even know if happened if I didn't follow you. So yeah, I mean, that's what I think. It'll just be cool to kind of unveil the curtain a little bit and really hear the stories that go on.
All right, guys. So let's jump right on into it. I mean, I think there is a really big red elephant in the room in the motorsports kind of discourse this weekend. Let's talk about Circuit of the Americas. Carson, you had a first and second hand view. You ran a couple of laps and a couple of races, and
Yes.
we'll get into that too. But I want to start actually with the Cup race first because I thought that man, that Cup race for regulation, quote unquote, was one of the best pure old school road course cup races that I have seen in a long time. They got rid of the stage break, so the race flowed naturally.
Yeah, that was big.
Even with the late caution, right? We still had a fuel mileage race. We used to have those all the time. And then we know what happened in overtime. It took, I think, 53 minutes to run
Is that
all
what it
three
was?
overtimes. Yeah, it was 53 minutes
Was
to
was it worse than the truck race at Knoxville?
I
Carson. You were
I
there.
was gonna say I was nothing's probably worse than that one. That was real. That was from the start though. That was like halfway. Like that wasn't just a
Yeah,
green
that's
white
true.
checker. Like
Yeah.
that was literally just halfway. That was like the whole race. That was just pandemonium.
Real fast, I got to tell you a story about that Knoxville race. My favorite memory of that race, actually, and Carson, I don't know if you remember this. I'm making the rounds because I was there for that race, and I come across you, and you're eating a salad, and you're just sitting
Yes.
there, you're eating this salad, and it made for great video content because I'm like, what happened tonight? And you're just kind of eating the salad, and you're like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm
My
still processing.
give AF after that race was very, very low. Like I was literally like I ran really good. I was up front the whole day, and then a guy stays out on old tires and I can't pass him because it was rubbered up so bad. Like I couldn't even so we just all drove into each other in the left side. I remember I came off I jumped every restart fully illegally. I jumped every restart. So I won a handful of restarts, but like because it was rubbered up, old tires were faster because it was like a slick track. So I was so mad that I got taken out and whatnot. So I visibly remember that. And then I remember so many texts about asking me how big of a pansy I was to be eating a salad right after a race.
So I want to stick with you, Carson. So I'm sure you've seen everything that happened at the end of the Cup race, and having raced that track and having watched the Cup race, can you give me some insight into why it kind of devolved into what it turned into?
Well, I think it's a lot of desperation. You not there's 30 guys out there all going into that tight spot. So like you can visibly see the leader if you're like 25th. Like you could visibly see him because everybody's so wide and it's 90-degree turn. So you could visibly see it. So you think you're going to get to 11th because they're so wide. They're 4 lanes, 5 lanes. So you're all of a sudden thinking, oh, well, I could make 10 spots here. And you just ran 25th all day and now you got a shot. And you know that if you hit the guy in front of you, there's a good chance he's either going to hit the next guy and the next guy is going to
Domino.
nobody's going to remember who hit anybody and nobody's going to be lined up the next restart. So I think everybody just realized that it was full open seat. It was a full on bar fight.
Well,
Like you just
is there a spotter issue too getting in? Like they can't. It's hard to clear you.
you can't for how
Where are
quick
they
it they're
exactly?
into one so they're into so that it's uphill into one and the spotters on top of the hill. So they're all looking straight, but like they're all looking like normally like spotters are like so high up
Yeah.
where the spotters are now only like a 3-story grandstand, like not like just a literally just a walk up pier. So they're like looking at you straight on basically.
They
They
can only
can't
see
see
straight on. They
anything.
can't see where you're
And
staggered.
for how quick everybody's happening, there's 5, 6 wide. You can't see, and then like you can't tell. So you're looking you're looking straight on rather than up top. So you
Yeah.
the spotters really can't tell
They're
exactly over anybody. So they're just all like
they're just ballparking you.
they're literally just calling crashes most of the time. Like they're just
Yeah.
calling out where the crash is, and then they just expect you to figure it out, basically.
What
Yeah.
are the restarts like there, even from like the truck series standpoint, like last year and this year? Like, is it a blind corner for you?
I never have gone into turn one worried about where I was. Like I use full mirrors. I never worried about like you just don't register. Like it's not quick enough to register a spotter, honestly. Like it's not I basically like my spotter basically knows like just basically to call crashes or like if they call the first part of the restart, like where you come out of the box and the guy's looking behind you, and then he calls the rest. Like he says, all right, inside, and then he calls where the crashes are. But like even in the Xfinity race, lap one, I went left and we were all tracking left, and they stacked up so bad that I jumped right last second. And if I didn't jump right, the car in front of me caved in his whole nose. His hood was through the roof, like it was so stacked up on the inside that I rolled the middle and actually passed him because they stacked up so bad. And I got to the next car. Like it is like it's built for F1. Like the F1 is
Supposed
like
to be too
the
wide.
whole start is like 90-degree turns because that's the biggest chaos of the race is like, oh, who's gonna like bury it into this corner, be 6 wide, and oh, they're now 2 wide. So that's why like you think of like Spa or other places, like all those corners are 9 wide, and then when they crash, they just crash and then they're done. Where in us, we just hit each other
You got to do it
700
over and over
times.
and over again.
Yeah, we just hit each other 17 times with a car that's indestructible,
Twice as many
and
cars.
then when they're spun out, and it's like, all right, well, if it's open feeding season, I'm just gonna go bury on into the next 7 guys.
Well, I mean, Suarez was basically mad at two guys for the same thing on the
Yeah,
same restart, right?
yeah, yeah.
Which,
And the funniest part is there was a third guy behind that he never even knew was there.
well,
If you
that's
watch the
all I can
replay,
think is like for the last like I mean, even before I got hurt, I kind of knew like don't make an ass of yourself before there's a replay. Like there's always gonna so like don't yell about this guy on the radio. Like go watch it and make sure you bitch about the right guy that wrecked you before you get that. And like he made that whole lap, chased him down, ran in the back of the
yeah.
one, ran in the back of the
Well,
40.
I think it comes back to like his team. Like that was like 2 restarts away. Like was that the final restart, or I think there was one more or something. But like he talked to his crew and like asked specifically 48 and one, right? And like that's just what they told him. So then he asked where they were, and then I don't know what they said after, but they said don't go get them. But like
He
they
actually
could have,
said, "I haven't seen it." Like, and he's like 48 and one, and they're like, "I haven't seen it," and he's just like, "Where are they?" And he's like, "You're not gonna catch them," and he's like, "The hell, I'm not."
he was throttled down. Like
I
he
mean,
was, like he I don't know, like if he was like what he was like 100% trying to do, but like I was told basically he got out like that nobody saw and went to the 48 window first, and then Bowman pointed him to go to Ross, and then he went to Ross. But and then that's obviously all the video stuff because they're teammates and stuff, and that's going to be the biggest selling point, obviously, of
yeah.
the weekend. But
So I guess my question though is this more of a, and the answer is probably a little bit of both, but is this really just more of a circuit of the Americas issue and what that turn one is, or to a lot of drivers' point after the race, is it really becoming more and more cutthroat at the Cup Series level and the value of a win or whatever?
I think so. I
Like
just think
which?
it's
Like is
oh
it
sorry,
turn one or
I think it's the cutthroat. Like I don't I don't remember a single one that got crashed besides the one in 99 because they just put it on Twitter 700 times. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't remember. So how can everybody else remember who they got crashed by? They know they got crashed by a lot of people. And like, there's no penalty. Like, there's no
Yeah,
like
that's
I
the hard
wouldn't have
part.
known Jetson Button intentionally crashed somebody unless he didn't talk about it on Twitter and say in his interview that it was the first time he's ever hit anybody intentionally. He was excited about it because it was fun. Like I've never like there's no penalties for anything. So it'd be like I mean it'd be like in football, like if you knew you could just slide or if you could just tackle the guy illegally without any repercussion, you're gonna do that because it's easier rather than, you know, fight the hard way. Whatever that like there's not a probably a good analogy for it, but like if you know the referees aren't going to look and you know the referees aren't going to enforce anything, what rules do you have other than if it happens to you, then you're shit out of luck and then you're just going to go do it back to him next time, you know, or you're just going to do it back to whoever's in front of you the next time. But I just think everybody's like that green white checkered scenario. Everybody's so such on kill that they get points. The guys that went out and get the beneficial of it without penalties, they're going to do it. So, and then the guys who didn't, they're going to whine about it, but then they're going to go make sure that the next road course, they're going to be on kill.
Do you want to see penalties or something, Kevin, like for this super aggressive driving? Is there something NASCAR you think should do to kind of rein it in a little bit?
I don't know. I feel like every time you start to get involved too much, it's a mess. Like we used to race in New Zealand with the midgets, and like they used to have rules like left and right. It was like you couldn't put your left front in the grass, and like you would race a guy, you drive around the top of him, and you would like take his bottom away getting into the corner or something like that, and like squeeze him a little bit, and then they would make this judgment call of he went in the grass because you pushed him down there, but in reality, like who's, you know, and it's just like you get these judgment calls, and I mean, obviously some of that stuff that happened the other day is could be registered as somebody did it, but like, what are you gonna do? Blame the fifth guy in line pushing? Like, how are you gonna judge it? Like, there's no way to do it. So I think it's just, I don't know how you're ever gonna fix it. I think back in the day there was just more respect in a way, because it's like, what if you cleaned out Dale Earnhardt? Was he probably going to keep you from getting a job the next year? You know what I mean? He could go to Hendrick or any of them guys and tell him, screw that kid. He's, you know, get rid of that kid. So I think that stuff, like nobody's scared anymore. They all make good money. Like they're only worried about winning a race. Like if one race can make your season to an extent, then sell out at the road course, because that might be your only shot too. Like that's probably some of the other aspect of it.
I think that's a really good point that I think nobody talks about, like on the respect and like the change of etiquette, like the rich kid talks, or, you know, money, like you had to like sell yourself on the racetrack back then. Like you had to, like, if you crashed a guy, you might be out of a job, or they might be an owner. Like all these owners are not going to like you or not. Where now
the old-timers gate kept. You know
yes,
what I mean?
yeah. Where now it's your job security is the people on your car, and all you care about. Like I've been in this situation where they don't care what I do on the racetrack. They want stuff like that sometimes. Like just because they're not overall race fans, they want you to play dirty and win, because that's all they care about. So like they want you to, like, that's all the people that matter to you. Like sometimes it's not even the owners that are in your ear. It's just the job security of the company on the race car. And all they care about is you're winning, or they want you to take out the guy. Why didn't you take out the guy leading? Like we could have won the race. Like that's just the mentality is now, rather than, you know, when you're out of a job, you know, back then, if you raced their guy clean all the time, that owner might remember that, and you might get a job next year or something like that. Where now it's whatever pocketbook you got, really, you go to the owner and they'll take you or not.
Yeah, I think it's just once guys started making a lot of money back in the day, I feel like it just became a deal where a lot of guys just weren't that upset. And now it's gotten at least back to where guys are. I felt like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it got to a point where everybody got out and they were just like, I got to go home earlier. Like they didn't really care, especially when it was season-long points, because most of those guys knew they probably weren't winning a championship at the end of the year, so they were just surviving-ish.
They get to go party early in Mooresville, and they get to go hang out on their yachts, and they'll get the beer cold and the dogs warm for the other guys that finish the race.
Yeah,
I think my biggest thing is like I look at this two ways. I want Cup Series and really just NASCAR, stock car racing to be super intense. I feel like we went through a period for like 10 years where, because of the motorhome lot environment, everyone got along, everyone's kids played together, and everyone was so afraid to rough each other up because you're parked next to them, and that created, I guess, too friendly of a dynamic at that level. But now, on a day where we had two Formula One world champions on the grid, a 7-time Cup champion coming back, a multi-time Indy 500 starter in the field, we were on the world stage as a discipline, and we had Jordan, right? Jordan Taylor, 3-time IMSA champion, and their takeaway is that basically this kind of racing is a joke and it's kind of fun to go beat and bang on people, but as a discipline, it's not something to be taken seriously. And I really worry that NASCAR, because of the championship format, because of multiple overtimes, the way that some of these track layouts are very purposely being built for. We think of Phoenix, right? We kind of want this kind of social media snippet of the dive bomb and do whatever it takes to win. My only fear in this super intense kind of racing that we've kind of evolved into is that it's becoming less of a sport and more of a show. And I think there's a way to have both, right? But I think sometimes
Hmm.
we on the NASCAR side tend to skew way too far over to the entertainment side to the point where I think almost it's kind of embarrassing sometimes. And that's my only fear is I don't want to go to the point where someone tunes in and they view it as kind of like the worst stereotype of Bowman Gray Stadium. And that's not even Bowman Gray. Bowman Gray has had shows that were less um, irritating to watch than that. So that's my big fear as a consumer of this product.
Did you watch pre-race by chance? I guess,
I just
or
that's not.
man, I like so they spent the whole pre-race with like Gunther and obviously Jensen and all this stuff, and all they did was just talk about like, have you ever run into anybody? Have you ever run in? And I mean, it's like it's entertaining to watch them, and Jensen's up there, and it's like, oh no, we've never really run into anybody. Like we crashed, we can't do that, and it honestly like I don't think they intended to do it, but like in a way, it just if I feel like if you were a fan from Europe that tuned in because Jensen was racing and you never really watched, like we looked like good old boys in that moment a little bit, and it became a very and then the race went the way it did. Like we looked like an F1 series for what a couple hours, and then all of a sudden it just went. So I think it's the same thing as Knoxville. Like we had a really good product for half a race or whatever there, and then it was like, now this looks like it's dumb. When in reality, it was just kind of a product of the racetrack and the circumstances that were given. At the end, like maybe there's something they can do better. Like Knoxville, they should have probably gone single file, and that would have made a difference for one thing, since there was only one lane of grip. But like, I don't know what you do about a place where you can go 7 wide and then need to funnel back to like
And turn 90
3.
degrees.
Yeah, and then you end up kind of like 5 on exit, and then the sand comes back, and it just they need to figure out something to make it like one solid, space or something like that. Maybe is all I can think of.
Yeah, I've always just wondered like what their end goal is up in NASCAR HQ, right? Like, I mean, there's a chance the Xfinity race this weekend is in the rain, like at Richmond. Like,
Yeah,
why are we like it's like they want to
entertainment.
mess it up, like just to have like all they care about really like we didn't really talk about how good the race is. All they posted on Twitter 700 times for their engagement is the 1 in 99 are teammates and there's an issue. And it goes against what that building like represents of family and everything, which they'll get over. Like they're all race car drivers and a team, but like it's just weird how it's just that so like it's past entertainment. Like it's like they've gone so far on like they just want it like a video game. Like they just want everybody to just go flat out, drive into each other and have everybody get out and start punching each other
Think about
and
how much
then
they used the clips of the rain last year at Texas and the disaster, and them guys plowing each other. And
well you think about like all the promos, like all the Fox like promos, everything for the 500. They used Ryan Newman's flip that like I'm like, why? Like they just all they do
yeah,
is so many crashes and like there's nothing about racing. Like there was a handful of like TikToks even that blew up like on my For You page of like hundreds of thousands of likes of just edits of the racing. I'm like, meanwhile you go to the NASCAR TikTok page and they all it is just crashes.
yeah.
What was your day like on Saturday? Let's talk about that Truck Series and Xfinity Series race. You didn't make it very far in both of them. What happened to your Saturday?
We've been talking longer than I raced those that
Yeah.
day. I the bleeder and the left front brake fell off. So all the fluid spilt out. So I went into the corner, had no brakes at all. I had no brakes the last 2 corners, and I was kind of thinking, okay, I just got them hot. I'll pump them and get them back. And all of a sudden, long break zone came and that thing was still on the floor. So I just banged it in third, banged it in second, banged I maybe first just to try and spin it out, spun it out, landed in the gravel, caution came out. They pushed me out, got me going, and the left rear axle broke and it was stuck in the rear end. So we fixed the brakes, fixed everything. I rolled off pit road and it wouldn't pull, it wouldn't do anything. So I thought I broke her gear, broke her rear end, something. And then when they were like, oh, it's an axle. So we tried to hustle and maybe lose only 2 or 3 laps. And the last tip of the axle was stuck this big in the rear end and it fell where the oil goes. So that's what ended that one. And then the Xfinity race, I was running, I think, passed for 13th. Not in an overly great car, a really underfunded deal that I found out I was driving on Thursday. So zero prep work. Passed the 88, passed 24, running with good cars. Shifted to second, and the input shaft broke just going down the front stretch. So, uh, just normal underfunded deal that I was probably running it way too hard for what it could take for how old, how maybe ran those gears were, whatever the case may be. But I still learned from those 7 laps, which I guess is worth it because I didn't run a lot in truck, so I got extra laps in the Xfinity car. But yeah, not. I was supposed to stay Sunday for like a sponsor appearance and whatnot, or was talked about it, but I just kind of was like, I'll see y'all next weekend. I'm ready to go home. I was not, I probably not very PR. Should have put on a brave face and kind of did my job, but I was like, not, I've never gone out that early in one race, let alone two in my NASCAR career. So I just need to see that racetrack on a TV screen and not in person.
We were just talking
That's-
today about I ran an Xfinity car in Iowa one year. It rained us out the night. We came back Sunday morning. We lost all the crews because they had to go do cup cars. It was going to be a big mess anyway. I got turned getting into one on lap 2. Killed it. Didn't kill it enough. Had to go right around. Had a rain delay in the middle of the race. I literally handed my credit card to my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, and said, "Get us out of here." She said, "There's no flights at all," or something like that. And I said, "Go somewhere. I just want out of Iowa." I was like, I feel you on that. Like sometimes you just need the hell out of the state when it goes bad like that. You just want it over with.
No, I was more than happy to leave Texas. I was literally just like we were walking out and they're like, "You want to go to dinner?" I'm like, "No, I don't want to go to dinner. I want to find the earliest flight out of here." Like,
I
is
went to
there
Miami.
any?
I was so mad. I couldn't get to Charlotte. I went to Miami, and then I went to the Keys, and I just made myself happy for like 2 days and went home. I was like,
I literally almost flew. Fuck, where did I fly? Almost fly to. I almost flew to. I almost convinced I almost convinced my mom because my mom and cousin were there, and I was like, I want to go some. I was like, I don't care where, just pick somewhere. And I gave like a list of three. I said, I want to go to any of these three. Just I'll do a connection. Like it was like fly out at 7 and overnight. And they're like, it's overnight. They're like, no, stop. You're not thinking right. You don't go overnight. I'm like, I don't care. I want to just, I'll sleep in an airport rather than sleep in this state right now.
I feel that,
Carson,
man.
did you have a an observation about our good friend Rowdy after the race? Is that something that you wanted to discourse over?
Well, I saw,
We're talking about the truck race, by the way.
yes, he was super upset about second, and Kyle's obviously known for his brief, sometimes very short-winded answers and questions. And like, I'm curious, like, what do you like? How do you adjust, or like, what like, do you ever like? I've never asked like a real journalist holding the camera, like when you like ask something and like you get a smart ass response or a snarky response, or like the driver's offended now at you or shooting back now at you. Like,
Yeah.
do you ever like, is there ever like a certain trigger? Like, do you then start poking the bear more? Do you shut down? Do you readjust? Like you're in that situation and Kyle Busch is giving you everything's fine, everything's great, or being smart ass or I'm being a smart ass, whatever. Like, where do you go? Like what's your initial response there?
Well, I think with Kyle, you have to kind of know um, what is your end game, because like when he gives you that one, basically I'm just here so I don't get fined kind of line, um, you see what he's trying to get at. So you can ask him one more time, knowing he's going to give you the same kind of answer, right? And three time would be three times too many, because then you're just kind of poking the bear, especially with Kyle, right? Like you have to, it depends on your relationship, right? Like you know with everyone how far can you take this before you're really getting under their skin. And depending on the circumstance, how serious it is, you can have fun with it or you can just kind of shut the door on it. I remember one time, NASCAR media day, back when we still did all three tours at the Charlotte Convention Center. Thor Sport had just made one of their litany of changes back and forth from Toyota to Ford to Toyota back to Ford. And because it was such a last minute thing, um, I guess Crafton was not going to talk about what this meant for the team or the changes, or what it's done at the shop. But I asked Kraft, and I said, what do you think about swapping over to Ford this year? How excited are you? And I still don't know to this day why he gave me this approach, but he says, just looking forward to driving my Ford F-150. I'm like, okay. The first time I'm like, okay. I'm like, but has it created any like hurdles, or are you guys kind of up against it this off season? Just looking forward to driving my Ford F-150. And I'm like, 10-4, Matt. And so, he just kind of chuckled, and we understood in that moment that's all that's going to happen. So, in the case of Saturday with Kyle, you could tell that he was more mad at himself, because
Yep.
he had called off the order to come down pit road. And in that case, Kyle already kind of told you the story there too. He's like, called me in 4 laps sooner, and I've been on both sides of the strategy. And so for me, in that circumstance, Kyle would have already given me the quote that I needed, what happened, how he felt about it, his visual, the face kind of told the story too. And so, especially with Kyle, though, there's no reason to poke that bear, because listen, he'll carry a grudge, and you're not going to be able to get what you need from him the next time. I think for the most part in the garage, if you ask a question that's offensive, or you write a story that's offensive, um, always make yourself available to kind of talk about it, right? Like I'll say this, like all I can do in any circumstance to where I've misrepresented something, or didn't have the proper context, or I just poked the bear by asking the wrong question. I personally always try to send the text or the DM or whatever and say, "Hey, listen, if there's something we need to talk about, I'm open, I'm available, I'm not going to shy away from it." And I've even said, "Listen, if I need to take a lashing, I'll hear you out, I'll own it." And so I think it's the key to any relationship, right? In life or business, you have to communicate and you have to talk about it. So, there's going to be times where in the driver media relationship that you're going to rub someone the wrong way, because it's super intense, right? It's super intense for you guys. It's super intense for us. We're competing with other media members trying to tell the better story, or get the story first. And sometimes when we're kind of in that mode to either try to get the really good quote or to get the quote first, we miss something. We miss context, or we miss, just some humanity. Sometimes we lack humanity. And all I can do is try to be available to talk about it.
How scared are you sometimes when before you hit post that like this is the one that ends it all? Like is there ever really been that moment? Like I know just as me, like I'm worried sometimes. Like I've loved to have an opinion sometimes about some things, but I'm always just like I gotta live with these people like every day. You know what I mean? Like this is, you know what I mean? Like is there a point like you're kind of forced to always have to like walk the line, right? A little bit.
So when I came up to you at Chili Bowl, one of the first stories I wanted to tell was the Larson Bell story. And you know, I got it from you, I got it from Rico, I got it from everyone except for Keith. Keith went full send with his answer. There was no trepidation there. But I kind of feel bad sometimes too, because it's like this is a really good story, and it's going to require everyone that I ask about it to either kind of defer and try to, not rock the boat, or if someone's got a really strong opinion about it, it's going to risk, alienating someone or force you to have a conversation, behind closed doors about it, or someone's going to
Yeah.
text you or call you. And I'm always aware of that, right? I think this is sometimes a strength of mine, but it's also kind of a weakness. I think there's two schools of thought. One, just write the story, right? Whatever the consequences are for you guys, be damned, because it's just the story. The story is the story. I see some validity to that, but I've got to live with you guys too. Like
Yeah.
I want to be able to go back to y'all for the next story, and I
Hmm.
want to go back and be able to have the next conversation. And so I always try to balance the need to tell the best story I can while also minimizing the harm. And I say harm, like we're talking about cars going in circles,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the harm more often than not is relative. But like right now, I'm dealing with a story to where, obviously Bubba Pollard and Casey Roderick are in this really deep feud, and these guys are really at each other's throats right now.
That whole
Got
thing
a great,
needs all that stuff. Like the whole payment late model scene to me from the outside just needs a reality show. It
yeah, oh,
seems
totally,
wild.
I
it is.
fully agree to like it
But
is so underrepresented. Like honestly, like I look at like dirt late models and like dirt like everybody's like either on YouTube, like Flo does a behind the scenes of like any story. Like dirt pavement has like me and Matt have talked about it has nothing. Like it like dirt late or
Hmm.
asphalt late models like it
Yeah.
has
If it wasn't
nothing.
for him, I wouldn't know it existed.
Even though like there's like if they put the Bowman Gray Mad TV show or
Yeah,
his
Madhouse or whatever.
Madhouse
Yeah.
with Bubba versus Casey, or just followed Bubba because Bubba always ends up with somebody about every year, every 2 years. There's a massive year-long issue with somebody. Uh,
he and
like
Steven,
yeah, him and Steven, was that 2 years ago? I think
yeah,
that was 2 years ago. Uh, yeah, like it was every 2 years. There's somebody like it just goes all year long, and it's especially with all these tours now coming up.
these are so here's the thing, these are really intense stories, right? Like it's really dramatic. And the problem I run into is I'll give you very specifically, right? Casey and Bubba, great relationship with Bubba. I've known Bubba now for 12 years and known Casey pretty much just as long. And I want to be able to continue easily telling their stories. But I recorded Bubba literally like attacking Casey in Tech at Pensacola, and I got the text from Bubba. Like this is going like inside baseball. After the race, I get the text from Bubba, and I don't. Oh God, he's gonna get mad at me for telling this story. But this is what we're doing here on the air. He's like, "I appreciate you always making me look bad," and I'm like, "Bubba, I've done just as much making you look good. Like I talk about." The blue collar work that you do behind the scenes, right? I talk about you always, bucking the trends, which chassis. Everyone else is going to pick the same chassis, and you want to do it your own way. I've told all these super positive stories. I'm like, I'm not trying to make you look bad, but like, you found a guy in tech and you went after him. Like
You
it's
did
the
it.
story,
Yeah.
and I think we're okay. And I'm sure Casey. I walk up to Casey after that race, and Casey shakes his head. He says no. And I'm like, I know, Casey, but you're the winner. And in this case, you won the race. I got to talk to you. I'll try to take care of you. I'm not going to make it all about Bubba, but like you won the race and I've got to talk to the winner. So that stuff's hard, right? Because like I respect all of you guys so much. And I know that the intensity of what you do is not always easy to process, and you're in the moment, and then the first thing that you do as soon as you get out of the car, it's me. Right? And so I recognize that that's not a easy environment, but I would kind of just push back and say that it's kind of intense for us too, because we're competing with the other guys, and I want to tell the most captivating stories that I can. And so balancing those things, kind of coming full circle, balancing those two things, respecting my audience and respecting y'all, is a really challenging thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that and they're always looking for that next little bit edgier stuff nowadays too. So it's tougher even more so. I think if I remember right, some of the reason why I even had a lot of this thought and with you too was I think it was when wasn't there a guy that just absolutely destroyed a guy like a year or so ago, like in Florida, like late in the year. That was a big deal. Like I mean, just absolutely on purpose. It was an older guy, and it was just kind of like I'll do it. I forget what the whole story was, but it was that was kind of the point where I knew like there was a lot more going on in the world that stories needed to be told.
The one that's I can't remember that one, but the one that always comes immediately to mind because both guys are now kind of stars in their own way was 2016 Snowball Derby, and that was William Byron um, moved Nasty, spun him out, and Steven was so mad that he turned around backwards on the track and just completely wiped both of them out. And
I don't
to
think.
your point, those are the kind of stories, right? It's like, what in the world possessed this man to take this really expensive race car and just completely junk both of them just to prove a point?
Yeah, that's always like when I tweeted you the other day about tires. It's always funny to me. I just think like these guys spend like infinite amounts of money. They're all rolling up in stackers to a lot of these races for the most part, and it's just like what's another set of tires really gonna hurt this situation to watch these guys idle around for 40 laps, But it's always funny. Like I used to spot for a buddy of mine at Hickory back in the day, and you'd show up and there'd be stackers at Hickory for a weekly race, and you're just like, this is a little silly.
Like, I mean, there was a race out in California, and my late model crew chief, he only crew chiefs me. I only run 8, 10 races a year, so he goes and does other guys' stuff and with our chassis stuff, and he's PR guy of the series asked why I don't go out there, why I haven't got brought out there, and it pays 10,000 to win. It pays $1,500 per second, and you have to if $4,000 of diesel fuel to get there.
Yeah.
It's a it's a 2 set tire race, and I'm like, no, of course I'm not gonna go out there. I can't go out there. Like I still try to do it like not try and blow a ton of money. But like it's crazy like how many stories come out. Like I honestly just I think for pavement late model world like reality show like almost just needs to be a snowball derby one because it seems like it all starts at Five Flags during the blizzard races. Like you think of like Chandler Smith hit Derek Thorne out of the way, won the snowball derby, and then Thorne intentionally spins him out in the blizzard race the next week, like or the next time they're at Five Flags. Like
Yeah, it always seems like it's like the winter months is when the payment late model world goes nuts more than anything, at least for me.
Carson, one of the things I have here on the show notes is that you wanted to talk about the I always feel so bad talking about money drivers or the rich kid narrative because I've always like personally I've thought that was kind of a low hanging fruit or kind of like race cars are expensive. Like no, like I've always said talent doesn't buy stickers like cash does. So I hate even having the conversation about you know rich kids or whatever. But you wanted to bring up something about that dynamic in dirt, right?
yeah, like I just always wonder, like Kevin, you see this a lot more, and you've been in the NASCAR world, and you know, like rental deals have always existed. Like it
Yep.
just is now more known now in NASCAR, but like rental deals existed in 2009, 2010. Just it wasn't just there were bigger sponsors that kind of offset it that nobody really knew.
Yeah.
Like when there was big sponsors, it just everybody was like, oh, it's a bit another big sponsor coming in with this driver, and they want to take a shot on this driver. That nobody put the connections together, but like I don't see that in like dirt late models. I don't see that in dirt sprint cars. I don't they're like it's never talked about. And I just always have wondered either why or like if that's even the case or is it like what the reasoning is like that's just like for me it gives me more appreciation for the late model guys and dirt sprint car guys because you feel like they're the superstars and they belong there. But I just don't know the ins and outs from
Yeah, so it's hard to say. It very much does exist, and I feel like the narrative is a little bit wrong in the way that it's looked at in some aspects of it, because most of it tends to be in the midgets, and obviously you see Keith's stuff and a lot of these guys, and obviously Keith's not paying for 11 kids to go race, so clearly whatever's going on, but it's just I think a deal like that, if a parent has the money to spend on it, then like, is it on them to do it all in house and buy a trailer and buy all this stuff and then try to figure out how to do it, or can they just like, I feel like it's not fair to like attack a kid for going and paying Keith on a midget when like it's not his fault. His dad maybe works 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but he just can afford it, and he just wants his kid to have the best. And I've seen a lot of people flop really hard by trying to do that themselves when they could have just spent the money and gone and had a car that wins. Like, if you come to the choice of spending 150 and probably maybe 250, like, wouldn't you rather just spend the 250 and watch your kid have success and know that you're not the problem? I think that's a lot of it, is you're just removing yourself from the issue and saying go ahead. And on that side of things, I think it's fine. I think it exists a little bit in all this stuff, to some extent, but it just depends on how it is. And a lot of these, it's technically they are, but it's like, are you if your parents own the team? Like, where's the line? You know what I mean? Like, is Austin Dillon one, or is he not, or did he, like, are you supposed to treat them differently just because they exist there? So I think there's a lot of gray areas in it, and I don't know how you're supposed to look at it, good or bad, because I think there's ways around it. I think it sucks that we've gotten to a point in our stuff to where that's the only way you ever get a chance, because there's probably a million kids that could do it sitting around and they're never even going to get an opportunity. And so I don't know. I to your point, they're there. I mean, I think probably a lot more people than you think are them technically on the dirt side. They're just family operations or, whatever. It's like, I don't even know who to really make an example of in it, and I don't even know if I want to say anybody has an example exactly.
Well, I know Kenny Wallace mentioned it, and that's what made me think of it. I'm like, man, like, why doesn't because it's just always talked about in NASCAR, and like it's almost like annoying because like you just know it's there. What talking about it like on 700 podcasts about the same thing and about the same few guys that like they mention in Cup or mention in Xfinity and stuff, and I'm like, it doesn't like I just always wondered. I'm like, why isn't this talked about like in dirt, or like maybe it does exist in dirt and it just everybody just shuts up about it, or maybe it's just not very well known, or like maybe there's not platforms there. Like I just always wondered like why it's so talked about here and then it's not even really a mention. I've heard it obviously in the midget stuff, but like
I think there's a whole other narrative there where the idea is that dirt racing is cheap and that the purses are covering it. And when it comes to the NASCAR side of things and all that, you're talking about a situation where we know it costs a whole lot and you have to have a lot of money, so it becomes more obvious there. Whereas in that stuff, it feels like a guy can, maybe that thing did come out of his garage, and so you never really know where somebody's spending their money. And I mean, some guys are really good at spreading it, I think in our world, and there's some guys that have a lot and they don't do a lot with it. And, we all look at them kind of the same way that I think you would in the pavement side when guys waste good cars, just like, I think it's going to be something that's going to happen in racing for the rest of the time. There's going to be really good cars and good crew chiefs probably that just absolutely lose their best years because, they had a guy that funded the deal, but he's just 80% of what he should be.
I don't understand why we have this conversation in racing in general, because like to me, like I'm a big baseball guy, and you look at pretty much every major leaguer of note, and they all played travel ball. And if you think about like, it's not as simple as just having a baseball bat and a glove, and then all of a sudden my kid's going to be a major leaguer. I mean, the amount of money that's poured into these travel ball programs and making sure that your kid ends up in the right school and with the right coaches, it to me is no different than making sure that your kid, your teenage driver ends up with the right crew chief and ends up with the right infrastructure and being able to be part of the Toyota driver program, right? Like, but for some reason, it's just so amplified. Like, there's no stigma in baseball. As someone who's like a diehard of like independent ball and minor league ball, no one talks about the stigma of being a travel ball kid, but just in motorsports, it just seems to be so much more emphasized for reasons that I just do not understand.
Yeah, I think there's a point where it's like, you're never gonna like completely knock a kid for buying them lessons. You know what I mean? And it's like to an extent maybe they are. So I don't know where you draw the line, like because it's kind of the same thing. Like if you can afford to take your kid to like LeBron when he retires and let him teach him how to play basketball, then like lucky for that kid. Like so be it. It's just kind of it didn't work out, and I mean, you can sit in the bleachers and look at them and be pissed that you don't have the money to make it happen. But it's just that's kind of is, and it's trust me, like you can sit and daydream that there's a combine where we're all going to drive the same car, and you're going to be able to like literally just like look at lap times and figure out who the best one is. And we did it like 20 years ago or something like that, and it was the biggest mess because it changed 20 degrees while we were there that day. You know what I mean? Like 15 people can't fit in the same car. I think it was two cars. Like you got brakes changed at different points during the thing. Like it's never going to work. And we're never going to be able just to go find out who flat ass is the best guy, straight up somewhere. Like there's just always going to be a variable that screws it up in our deal. Like it's not a 3-point contest, and there just kind of never really will be to an extent.
I think at the end of the day, if you look at the caliber of talent at the NASCAR Cup Series level, even at Formula One, IndyCar, World of Outlaw sprint cars, both national tours for dirt late models to operate at the highest level of any given discipline, you're going to have talent. Otherwise, it's going to chew you up and spit you out. And I think it's the same way with stick and ball sports too. And I just think that at a certain point, your ability to be able to get it done is going to eventually matter. And what you do to put yourself in that position, who was your benefactor, doesn't matter, right? Because again, at the end of the day, race cars are expensive, and it takes someone's money to get there. And I just wish that we had more. And I think those of us in the industry do have very informed conversations that fans don't have. But I wish that I could better illustrate to fans that this thing that you guys talk about a lot, it just doesn't matter as much.
I've always just wondered where like when the disconnect came from. Like when so like I always like dirt it's like from an outsider perspective, like it blows my mind how big purses are. Like it blows my mind how there can be $700,000 shows at one racetrack throughout the year, or three here, and like there could be $50,000 shows at some Joe Schmo racetrack that you never really heard of. And I'm like, how do they afford that when there's not the tire money, there's not all this other stuff, right? So there's that. So that's exciting to go watch. Like I turned into the Dirt Million like everybody else, not because I wanted to see a great race. I tuned in only because I wanted to see who won the $1 million. That was first priority. Like big money sells, right? And I I don't care a lick about NBA or whatever, or NFL very often, but like when I see on Sports Center that someone's making $783 million on their contract, all of a sudden now I'm interested a little bit. Like
Yeah.
now I care. Now I'm tuned into that little Sports Center clip. Now I want to know who the hell that guy is and why he's making $787 bazillion. And like F1, like they're the richest of kids in my mind, like in the sense like it's just weird how NASCAR like a driver will get announced and then it'll just 100 comments on Facebook is just about, oh, whose dad's money is this or who's this? And like when he ran ARCA, ran good and ran trucks or ran whatever, ran good or ran decent, but like he's instantly labeled as a kid with money or somebody with money if they don't know instantly who they are.
So I'll end this conversation on this note. To me, about how at the end of the day, the talent has to eventually win through. The same family that had the means and the connections to send Logan Sargent to the Formula One grid this season also saw his brother, his older brother, Dalton, only get as far as the truck series to where he missed the playoffs and he was out of the truck as soon as the playoffs started. And we never heard from Dalton again. And I'm not picking on Dalton. I love Dalton. I love that family. Great family. And for all the talk of the sergeant's connections and the means that they had to get Dalton to NASCAR, to get Logan to Formula One, there just came a point at the end of the day to where you have to start winning, and performance still matters. And it certainly matters in NASCAR and it matters in Formula One too. Um, we have made this show very long-winded, and I promise that's on me. And I'm going to do a better job of formatting and trying to steer the ship better. Not having to cut off the stream halfway through and do it again. We're going to do a better job of that too. But one thing I want to do at the end of every episode, and we'll certainly start here, is we are all over the place, like collectively, the three of us. On any given weekend, we are going to be at probably different racetracks. And so I guess I'll start with Carson first. I assume Texas for trucks, right?
Yeah, I get to go back to this good state of Texas, so I get to remind myself what that place looks like from 4 hours away, and I'm looking really forward to that.
Do you like Texas Motor Speedway? It's such a polarizing track. Do you enjoy
Rest in
racing the truck
peace.
there?
Yeah, I I like the state of Texas because that's where my boss is from, and that's where my company that sponsors me is from. So the state is great. It is awesome. The racetrack, they sponsor the racetrack. So like this is very
You like it. You
yeah.
enjoy it. You go run great.
It's a
It's gonna be
great
fun.
it's a great racetrack. It's a great racetrack. I would just wish they would like just change it a bit to where like I wouldn't recognize it if I would show back up, but it's not a terrible racetrack.
I
It's just
loved it
not.
before they repaved it. That
It
was one of my
looked
favorite
great
plays.
before they repaved it.
When
The
it was
problem is
slick, it was
I think
phenomenal.
I think I'm very easy to say. I feel like they messed up. Like they drew it up and then it didn't like they had to have had like some sort of idea on what that racetrack was going to be, and I guarantee that they watched it happen and then they were like, "Oh yeah, this is not how we wanted this thing to race."
I look forward to the blank slate that Texas is going to be because I don't think it's sustainable the way it is now for another year or two. And I know that SMI has North Wilkesboro and they've got Fairground Speedway Nashville, but the Dallas Fort Worth market is important to all of us. That is a huge place to be. Super enthusiastic race fans, and I know that that's a place that we've got to find something better for. And I think within the next 2 years we're going to start having that conversation more because that market is super important. We have to put on really good shows there. And just right now, we're not. But I look forward to what that place could be because I know they are thinking about it and there's other priorities, but the ideas are percolating. Kevin, where are you going this weekend? What you got?
I was maybe gonna go 360 racing with Hardy that works for me here, but they already canceled it as of today. So I think literally everything dirt is gonna disappear because I know the Illini 100's gone. The Outlaws are still kicking at Texas or at Devil's Bowl, but yeah, past that I don't know. So I'm just sitting at home watching everything.
I am going to have a grand stereotypical Matt Weaver adventure this weekend. So we're going super late model racing, pavement racing this weekend. The SRL National Tour is at my home track in Mobile, and the ASA Southern Super Series is going to practically run at the exact same time in Cordele, Georgia. And Bubba Pollard is going to fly back and forth, and the tracks have backloaded one show, front loaded the other show to allow Bubba and Casey Roderick to take that feud to both tracks and race two races in a span of 3 hours. And Mr. James Finch has been kind enough to invite me on the airplane with Pollard. And
I was gonna ask you if you were going on the
yeah,
airplane.
yeah, I'm going to be on the plane with with Mr. Finch and Bubba, and that's going to be incredible content.
Can you find
Um,
out if I'm still the like all time track record of Mobile?
I'm going to look into that. So I was looking at your third turn page a couple of months ago,
Yeah.
and I think your first ever win was listed as was a must see extreme sprint car
No,
race.
it's USCS. They used to run
Okay,
pavement USCS 360 races, and then like we used to run Pensacola, like Florence. We ran Concord, ran Hickory. Where else did we go? Mobile, Lanier. I'd be the all-time fastest lap Lanier. I know that. It was like 3 seconds or something. It was stupid. They ran like they had like 40 pavement late models there, and the sun went down, and then we went out to qualify, and I went from on the brakes in hot laps to almost wide open qualifying at freaking Lanier. And like I felt like I could have gone faster because I had no idea that was gonna be that much grip. But yeah, that stuff used to be really cool. So yeah, let me know because I think I have the fast like Florence, like a lot of those random places. We used to have a lot of random track records.
that sounds like a great cliffhanger for next week's episode. This is the burnout. This is the trial and error and mostly error
Yeah,
episode of the burnout. But we're going to make it better. We appreciate you all tuning in. Kevin, Carson, I appreciate both of you guys for jumping in and doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I appreciate y'all's background, perspective, and time. And we're going to do some really cool things together.
yeah, I'm excited for it, man. So we will get back at it next week.